I want to introduce you to a delightful lady who has been working in this area for many years, Ms. Leslie Jones. Leslie, can you tell us how you have been involved with guardianship?
Yes, I can. Thank you. I am an attorney with Kentucky Protection and Advocacy. Kentucky Protection and Advocacy is the designated state agency that works under federal law and protects the civil rights of people with disabilities. With us today to talk about considerations for parents with children of disabilities, we have Stella Beard with us. Stella is a parent of a child with a disability, and she's also associated with Kentucky SPIN. Stella, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Stella Beard. I am a parent. My son is 25 years old, and he has an intellectual disability. But I also work for Kentucky SPIN, that is the Kentucky Special Parent Involvement Network. I am the former assistant director there, but just recently I am now semi-retired, and I am now the virtual consultant. So I do all of our virtual webinars, training, setting those up, and we really were very involved with that during COVID. So that's what I do.
Stella, you have a son with a disability, and your experience runs the whole spectrum of guardianship.
Absolutely.
Could you tell us how you and your family started thinking about guardianship for your son?
I have a son, Clayton. He has a disability called Williams syndrome. It's an intellectual disability. And of course, we knew since he was 9 months old that he had this. So we've been planning as best as we can for his future. I always knew, guardianship was probably going to come up at some point. And it's very funny, even though you're aware that it's there and you're going to have to start thinking about it, it's like overnight, it happened, and there we were having to make that decision. And so at that point, I remember in that transition IEP meeting where we had to think about that and decide what we were going to do. And I'm in this field, and I've been in this field for many, many years, so I was aware of different things, but again, I had my parent hat on, not my professional hat. I had my parent hat on, and it's a little different when you're operating in that parent role versus when I'm telling other family members, their options. So it was just a little bit of a bigger decision than I had anticipated.
Were you aware that if you got guardianship for your son, that he would lose some of his civil rights, like the right to marry, he could lose the right to vote, the right to drive a car, the right to enter into a contract?
Well, I would love to say that someone told me all that, but they did not. But I researched myself, and I understood that the decision I was making at the time was life-changing for him. But I will admit that I operated in fear, as I think a lot of families do during that time, because I didn't want him to be taken advantage of. I didn't want all of those things to occur. To be honest, to be totally aware of all of that, no, I wasn't. And so as we begin that process, even after the process, I began to go, you know what, I really want to backtrack a little bit and think of some other alternatives. And so we began to work over the next 5 years after I did get guardianship of Clayton to find a way where we could do some different alternatives. But I wish I'd done it the other way first.
I know some parents seeking information come upon guardianship just doing normal research. Other times the issue of guardianship arises in a school setting during an IEP, an individualized education plan meeting, or it's brought up by the medical profession. Was it brought up in any of these areas for you?
At the IEP meeting, yes, it was. And because I was in the field and I knew a little bit about guardianship at the time, it was brought up, and they asked me what my decision, was going to be. And so I will say, Clayton actually turned 18 on May the 11th in 2015, and I immediately had a court date on May the 12th. So I had planned ahead 3 months out to go ahead and do the guardianship after he turned 18. And like I said, you know, I wish that I'd really dove in a little bit more. What we family members do, though, is we fight for that least restrictive environment all through their education in school. And we want them with their typical peers. We want them in regular education classes. And for some reason, in our minds, when they turn 18, we definitely go into fear mode. And we go back to that most restrictive decision, which is full guardianship. And instead of really laying out all of those options for me, it pretty much was kind of discussed that that was the answer we were supposed to do.
Now, you had to go to court.
We did, went to court.
And before that, you had to file a petition.
Yes.
Did you do that on your own, or did you have help?
Well, I'm not going to say the county, but I went to the courthouse there, and they really didn't know what to do. As was said at the beginning, you know, we have 120 counties, and they all operate differently. So it was I kind of was educating them on really what to do in the process. And I had researched and found, you know, the petition that I needed and had it printed and was ready to do everything. And I knew the reports that needed to be done prior to that. So I had already been to my pediatrician. I'd pretty much done all of the front work for this. And then went to the courthouse and asked for a court date. So the process is very tedious and very long. And to be honest, it was probably one of the hardest days of my life, sitting in that court.
You had a court hearing.
Yes, we did. With a jury. We had a jury trial.
And what was your son present?
He was not. And it was my choice not to have him there. He did have a court-appointed attorney that was there on his behalf. But I remember on the stand, because you have to testify, you know, and what you're doing is you are declaring your child incompetent. And it was very hard to do that. But I had documentation that talked about his disability. He does have a very low IQ, but he excels in so many other areas than that. And so his court-appointed attorney, who was there to act upon his behalf, really did not know him, of course. And so I was playing both roles. I was kind of, you know, his attorney and also advocating for, you know, me to be able to be his guardian. And, you know, so I'm telling the court even, you know, I wanted this to be temporary. I had high hopes for him, and I wanted him to be able one day to have all of his rights back. So that was a very difficult day, though, to speak in front of a jury and also to say pretty much most of the negative things, you know, that you have to say in the courtroom. And so it was very hard.
That gets to the question, how involved was Clayton in the process, and how did he feel about it?
He was involved. We did have a discussion about it. I gave him the option of being there. He chose not to, and so I went with his wishes. And, you know, I want to say he understood everything, but he did not. But I went ahead when I felt like at that very moment on May the 12th, 2015, to do what was best for him. And at that moment, I can say in my heart, I felt like that was what was best for him at the time.
Congratulations.
Yes,
I want to thank you for sharing your family's story.
Absolutely.
But before we leave, I think I want to ask you one last question, and that is for parents who have to consider guardianship for their son or daughter with a disability, what are some of the things you want to point out to them?
I would really tell a parent to look at their options. Look at all the alternatives before you make that big choice, that big decision. Through school, we fight for them to be in the least restrictive environment. We want them with their typical peers. We want them in regular education classes. And then it seems like when they turn 18, we get afraid and we go to that most restrictive environment. So my advice is to lay out all your options, put it on paper, decide what is best for your family at that time. And always know that you have a choice. You have a choice and a decision. Your child should be a part of that choice. And so just laying out those options, looking at those alternatives before you make that decision is the best way to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.